Hello and welcome to the LMS Rambo. My name is Aaron Spears.
And I'm fucking Brad Hathcock. And with us today, special guest, Dan Montleone. We've had him on before. As everybody might remember, it was the episode that Brad wasn't there because my fucking audio did not kick in at all, even though I was there for the whole podcast.
Our most heavily edited episode.
Our only edited
Love to
episode.
be part of that.
How are you, Dan?
I'm great. I'm great, guys. How about you? How's it been?
Oh, I'd say pretty good.
Okay.
All things
Dude.
considered.
Yeah, and I believe this is episode 69, making it a special episode.
Nice.
Just for Dan. That's why we had you on.
When we started, Brad, you were talking about the NHL trade deadline. Do you want to talk about that at all, or do you just want to get into something else?
No, man. Let's talk about it a little bit. You know, the Flyers actually traded Sean Walker and got a first-round pick and Ryan Johansson, who they ultimately put on waivers and are looking to probably buy out, in my estimation. I haven't seen that yet, but that's probably what's going to happen. We've seen some pretty big trades. Buffalo traded Casey Middlestat for Bowen Byram. It seems straight up. That's probably a good deal for them to get better defensively, for sure. I mean, your Florida Panthers look like they're picking up Vlad Tarasenko. I think that's a done deal. That's a good deal for them. How you feel about that?
I feel great about that. I feel like, first of all, the fourth line is my favorite to watch. Actually, and that I think says a lot about that team. That it's so exciting that the fourth line can win games for them. I just think that it's really exciting to see them and Edmonton kind of get ready for they're all just making the run. They're getting ready for the run. That means that they have full confidence in it. I'm surprised the Flyers did what they did, though. Are you?
So the Flyers had mentioned that they're basically going to be rebuilding, and for the foreseeable future, they are way overachieving. They had two of their better players come back this year after they missed pretty much all of last season. But they did say they were going to go ahead and rebuild, and then they're in the midst of this good season, so they're doing some stuff to subtract, but also be able to kind of grow for the future. So like I had mentioned, they have 2 first-round picks this year, 2 first-round picks next year. I assume they'll be looking to maybe pick up some more of those lottery tickets, but we'll see, because again, they're in the midst of the playoffs. They just signed a 6th defenseman for 4 years and $2.7 million per year. That's not good, in my opinion. On most other teams, Nick Seeler probably would be like a 6-7 defenseman, maybe not really even playing in the NHL, and he's 30 years old. So 4 more years of Nick Seeler. It looked like a lot of people were interested in his services. I would have taken the lottery ticket there, in my opinion.
Dan, do you like hockey and watch hockey?
I'm ashamed to say it now, listening to your conversation, but I don't follow it super close, which is
Ask
Immortals.
him what sport he watches, Aaron.
I don't watch sports, as Brad would say.
He watches sports entertainment.
I prefer sports entertainment.
I know what that means.
but I also watch UFC, so I watch UFC a lot. Obviously, I like my sports entertainment, and I know it's a mortal sin. Most of my friends love hockey. I just don't. I never really got into it.
And when he says most of his friends, he means me.
You and actually the buddies that I was living with for a couple of years, there was hockey on all the time. I would watch it, and it's interesting to watch, but it's not like I ever got super invested.
Hilariously enough, I turned Aaron on to hockey last year, and he is already obsessed, absolutely obsessed.
I don't want to give you full credit for that. I did a lot of it on my own because it just happened naturally. But
that's just because he doesn't want to give me credit for anything.
I truly don't.
But
Dan,
dude, his first game was like a triple overtime game.
Oh.
6
So
overtimes.
it was like
Oh.
Or no, not
5 overtimes.
No, it was.
I think it was 5.
It was the 6th
It hit
longest
4 or
game ever
5.
played. Yeah, that's what I meant.
Wow.
And it was like the first game he ever watched.
So that
But
was
he was in California, so it was only on till 9 o'clock.
He was in there with both feet right into the deep end. Then
He just jumped right in playoffs last year.
yeah.
Well, I'm not the kind of person who could just naturally like I love football, but I love it because I've always loved it. I can't. Brad can't just say, "Oh, go watch hockey," and then I'll go, "Yes, okay, I'll do that." Now I love it. Like it has to be natural.
A natural development. Yeah.
But somehow it did. Somehow it was wait, this team is from Florida. Oh, they're in the Miami-Dade area. Oh, go on. Oh, I like this Paul Maurice guy. Oh, I love these. I'm just kind of. It just happened that way.
And it's
now
snowballs.
He's a fanboy though.
Well, I have seen every game the Panthers have played this year, and I won't do that again next year. But I wanted to do it this year because I don't know. I felt like I'm on the cusp of watching something great. But before we talk about anything, I wanted to ask you, Vince McMahon. You're talking about WWE, right?
Yes.
Okay. Why did he just sell a bunch of stock?
Name one other sports entertainment that is real.
Well, let's not. I don't want to get too deep into the weeds, but recently it was. So this is a little bit in the weeds, but TKO, which is a new company, which is basically UFC and WWE, they are essentially in a partnership under this new brand called TKO. Vince McMahon, he's basically getting phased out of the WWE. They don't mention him. They've removed him from games. They're going to remove him from TV. And the reason is because it was found out after the acquisition of the WWE by TKO that he was doing some heinous things with some ladies and got himself into horrible legal trouble. And I've read the indictments against him, and they're terrible. And if everything in them is to be believed, and if everything said is 100% true, they're going to blacklist it. They already have. He's not in the upcoming game. He's never ever mentioned on TV. He never will be. And the same goes true for Brock Lesnar, because Brock Lesnar is involved. So they removed Brock from the game. They'll no longer be discussing him on TV because of everything in this allegation, which tells me that it's real. It's whatever was in that indictment, which I read. If everything attached to him is real, which I think it is, he's gone. Brock Lesnar's gone. Vince McMahon is gone. And even rumor has it that Stephanie McMahon is also gone because she may have known something about it and covered it up or whatever. We don't know about that yet. But.
So what I'm hearing is Stephanie McMahon is Ghislaine Maxwell.
Oh, God.
And, well, so, Aaron, I don't know if you actually know about this. I have heard a little bit about this, Dan.
Mm-hmm.
One of the female wrestlers, I don't know her name,
Ashley
alleged
Massaro.
Sexual trafficking.
Yes, that was an incident with a girl that has since... She's since, unfortunately, she self-deleted a couple years ago, and it turns out that she may have had some problems with Vince McMahon, and that may have led to that. We don't know. No one knows.
She killed herself.
Aaron's idiot brain just discovered what self-deletion is.
I had to say it because I wasn't sure
I
could say. If I didn't want to, I wanted to use it that way. I wanted to keep it.
You can say suicide. We're on Rumble. It's fine.
All right, so I can say suicide. All right, cool. Yeah, so Vince may have done things to her or facilitated things. The worst part is the WWE. Now, again, this is why I didn't want to get into the weeds because I could rant all day. But anyway, suffice it to say, Vince is gone. Brock is gone. Stephanie might be gone. We'll see what happens.
That's interesting about Brock Lesnar. I actually was not aware that he was part of all this.
Yeah, so if you...
But I have heard some things, I guess, just his name popping up, but it was not as, a matter-of-factly as you're pointing out. And
yeah,
so I wasn't that sure.
The WWE and TKA group are like, nope, no more mentioning him. He won't even be mentioned on, I believe, UFC programming because they're attached.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Is
So-
I've kind of heard his name in that regard
Mhm.
from the UFC perspective
Mhm.
because he was a big draw there. But
Huge. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'll ask you two questions actually, and then we'll move
Sure.
on. First,
And we'll move
have
on.
you seen his pencil mustache?
Oh, you mean how Vince looks like a 1920s supervillain on one of those moving
Yeah.
picture shows?
A cereal?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm gonna
It looks
sex traffic
terrible.
you, see?
Yeah, twirl the mustache. It looks terrible. First
does.
of
Get in
all,
the back of the van.
Yeah, see, honestly, I don't know what he was thinking. It was probably all the roids rotting his brain because
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
that man had done them.
He's juiced out.
No, I don't know why he would ever show up in public thinking that he can dye his hair jet black and have like a Hitler mustache and think that anyone is going to go, "You're a handsome fella there, Vince." At almost 80. Come on.
Almost 80.
I'm actually shocked he's still alive with all
Me
the
too,
fucking
me
roids
too,
he's
me-
done in his life.
Goodness, there was a time where I thought that was it for Vince, but no.
My second question, more important. Did you watch
Sure.
the Iron Claw?
That's the story of the Von Erichs, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
So I know the story of the Von Erichs because, being a wrestling fan, the Von Erichs are a big wrestling family. I haven't seen the movie, but I know all about the tragedy that unfolded with the Von Erichs, and I've heard good things about the movie. I want to check it out.
Talk about great haircuts.
Listen.
Holy fuck.
Listen.
Zac Efron's haircut in that is just mwah.
Somebody said,
I
why
saw
does
a
Zac
meme
Efron's
today.
jaw look like that?
Did Zac Efron play Kerry Von Erich in that?
Who was the one who's
whoever the
not
one that
dead?
survived.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, spoiler alert. For those of you
Yeah.
who don't know anything about the Von Erichs, they pretty much all died or suffered
Yes,
horrific
yes.
injuries
Oh my goodness,
in
that
some
family.
capacity, except the oldest brother.
Mm-hmm. Wow. I mean,
The way
Really
that movie
unfortunate.
handles that stuff too, like there's a scene. I won't spoil anything else
no,
in the
you
movie,
can
but
tell me because I know the whole story.
I'm trying to protect
Yeah.
our listener.
Oh, then you don't want to spoil everything else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dude, I
There's
saw
a
a
scene.
meme today where it was like, oh, Mom, did you cut your own bangs? And the picture of
Zac Efron.
It's fucking like egg haircut.
Oh,
there's
he
the
went
scene
through
where,
training.
Oh my god, he's so jacked in that movie.
Yeah,
He's ripped out of his mind.
He wakes up out of bed in the opening scene, and there's just veins popping out all over his body, and he's just waking up like. But there's a scene where Jeremy Allen White gets on a motorcycle, and that's all I'll say is like the movie just does this so well, where you're like, oh my god, what's gonna happen?
Oh yeah,
Mhm.
It's so weird because like every time there's like some big like meaningful moment with
Mhm.
one of the brothers, it's like they're dead.
Yep.
They're dead. Yep.
It
It's-
really is powerful in that way.
It was. I mean, it goes down as one of the saddest things to happen in the wrestling world. They did an episode. I know you guys may or may not be familiar with it. A show called Dark Side of the Ring.
I've heard of that.
Yeah, it's actually great. It delves into all these rumors and stories that you might hear. I think Vince is going to get a Dark Side of the Ring episode in like 2 more years because of
Oh,
everything that's going
probably.
on with him. But
Well, so
yeah,
during that Von Erichs period, Vince is involved in all this, is he not?
no, that was
Oh.
back in the territory days. It's a whole big wrestling thing. I don't
Okay,
wanna go,
don't worry
we
about
won't
it.
go we won't go into the weeds, but
Yeah,
it's a
So all you really need to know in the short of it is wrestling used to be very regional.
mhm.
It wasn't until Vince McMahon took over that
Bought
he took
all
it
of 'em.
national.
Yep, and
Yeah.
he slaughtered his competition to do it.
Yep. So
Yeah,
it was
that
just
movie
a very
does touch
regional
on
thing.
that.
It does touch on it a little bit, and I went into that movie knowing absolutely nothing about the Von
Von
Erichs
Erichs
because
Me
I
neither.
stopped watching wrestling.
in like the mid 2000s, early 2000s.
Yeah, like I stopped watching wrestling when I got a girlfriend. So-
Oh, what's that supposed
How
to mean?
dare you?
Oh, look out!
I'm all in today, Dan.
Shots
I've been
fired.
really excited for this episode.
Hey, listen, that's
But
good.
I went in to that movie watching it just because I love A24 movies. They're great.
They're great. They're
Oh,
great.
Zac
yeah.
Efron is actually a very underrated actor in
That's
my
his best
opinion.
performance.
And
like he's ever
Jeremy
done.
Allen White is great. So plus the dad, I don't remember what movies he was in, but I've seen him in a bunch of shit, and he's always great in that. So I was really excited to watch this movie, and it didn't disappoint, in my opinion. It was a little long to be dragging out all the depression.
Yeah, isn't it like several, like 2.5, 3 hours long?
I think it's like 2.5.
2.5.
But for as depressing as it gets,
Oh,
it's like drawn the fuck out.
yeah.
But A24 does that. That's kind of like one of their
That's their
calling
shtick.
cards.
Yeah, they do that.
So I guess I should have foreseen that coming.
You know, I just gotta tell you, like, I didn't feel like that at all. I was kind of like, it was one of those movies where I was just kind of in. It took me out of reality for the time it was going, you know?
Oh, I was in it, and I was engaged the whole time. Like, I really did think it was a good movie, and Dan, I highly, highly recommend you go and watch it.
I do too, especially now that I've learned this.
Yeah, I will, and it's like it's been on my radar, but I haven't had a chance to. But I'm definitely gonna take care of it.
All right, we need you to watch like 200 movies before the end of the year, so you can join us for our end of the or beginning of the year
Send
movies.
me a list. Send me a list. I will start watching.
Okay, I'll send you a list. Don't use his. His
No,
list.
don't use his.
Movies from this year, or at least in the last 30 years.
I know what you've got on
idiot.
your list. You've got fucking trash on there. I know you do.
Of course, I am trying to watch the movies from this year. So
is Madam Web on that?
At the start of next year, unfortunately for me, it is.
Okay, well, is Madam Web on your list?
I said, unfortunately, it is.
Yeah. Well. Yeah.
But luckily for me, there's not enough time in the year to get to everything on my list, so that one might kind of drop its way down.
No, you have to watch it because it connects to all the other shitty Sony movies you've written down on that list, like Kraven the Hunter.
Now that one might be good. I actually want to see that one. It might be good.
We're not doing this. I'm not talking about this shit with you guys. Moving on.
Got him.
I go down this road. Okay, so Brad, you wanted to talk about something we brought up this week. You said that. Well, why don't you frame it since you're the one that thought of it?
Okay, so the way that I framed this to you and our one super fan, that's not Dan, by the way. He's a fan. And a guest, but he's not the super fan.
Maybe I should come for that title.
Hey, by all means,
I give it to you.
But the way I phrase this to our super fan is, we kind of joke around all the time about elections. Aaron and I have talked on here ad nauseum about elections, and so the way I actually phrase this, because every year they say, this is the most important election of our lifetime, blah, blah, blah. I posited that this could be the last election that we see in the United States as what we know it today, because, and as we've actually talked about here before, the downfall of civilizations or empires, if you will, occur about every 250 years.
Mm-hmm.
So let me take you back almost 250 years. It is 1776, and we sign the Declaration of Independence, fight a war, start expansionism into the West and further, and then obviously further empire expansionism into having military bases all over the world, basically being the world police, controlling geopolitics throughout the entire world. Again, expansionism, in my opinion. But now, in 2026, that brings us to 250 years, which is the average, I believe, or the general amount of time that it takes for large empires such as ourselves to collapse.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay, so my immediate thought, because I want to just disagree with you no matter what, and I was thinking what makes an empire? What is it? The size? What do you define an empire as?
Yes. So Aaron asked this question about basically what this looks like, and I started looking into it as I usually do, and I said, you know what? Let's talk about this on the podcast, because there's a lot to it. So what I did is I started diving in and researching about the fall of empires. I'm not going to go into the historical context of it, mostly just how it applies to the U.S. and what
Today.
we're kind of talking about here today. So empires, as it's generally known, refers to as a central state that exercises political control over a large amount of territory containing many diverse groups. Obviously, we do that. That's just your standard makeup of the United States. But also, we preside over Puerto Rico, which is an estate, Hawaii, which was actually annexed and built into the United States, as well as with all of the military bases kind of throughout the country and embassy, or throughout the world and embassies. So it says often this centralized power rules from one or several capital cities, and they usually refer to an empire as if it was a single unit, but they are typically so large that they are divided into smaller, more manageable political units called provinces. So obviously we see that 50 states, as well as territories, and again, they kind of govern themselves in these embassies and whatnot, just kind of abiding by U.S. law. So that is kind of how an empire is defined. Obviously, it looks different today than empires of old, in my opinion, just because everything has changed and been more modernized. But I believe everybody would agree here, especially, that the U.S. is a modern empire.
No.
Yes, come on, the world trades in our currency.
Yeah, but it's not the same thing.
It's very much the same thing.
Yeah, but what you're talking about is like the British Empire or the
Which fell.
Russian Empire.
Which fell.
Yeah, the Roman
I know.
Empire.
Which fell.
Yeah, well, the Roman Empire fell because of a lot of different factors that don't.
And more recently, you said the Soviet Empire that collapsed as in 1992.
Yep.
So we are a modern empire, sure, and you could very much see, and we'll actually kind of touch on that topic, the splitting of the United States into individual statehood. It's something that's
been on the table. Mm-hmm.
It has been on the table, and that is another thing that I planned on mentioning. California in 2016, when Donald Trump threatened to secede from the United States, as well as Texas has threatened to secede, as well as one other state, I believe, when Obama won presidency.
But there's a pesky thing that makes that almost impossible, and that's that we have a constitution and 50 states.
Well, it's not necessarily impossible for a state to secede. Obviously, we've done it in the past, and it caused conflict, and I don't think it would be any different this time if that were to take place.
So Dan, like, what you're talking about, like, right now, like this year, like with
maybe not this year.
Well,
no, by 2026.
Like 2026. Basically, what we're saying is like the election this year, because I think this year is going to be like uniquely awful.
It's going to be bad.
Yeah.
But in my opinion, that actually sets the stage for exactly what
correct.
I am talking about.
And Brad, you're not wrong, because like you said, and you said
I
it.
hear that so
right?
frequently.
Well, there. So with California threatened to secede from the Union when Trump was elected. They didn't do it, but they talked about it, and I believe at some point there was something actually up for. I don't remember where it was. Was that Texas that I'm thinking of that actually started to seriously think about it?
I believe so.
Maybe it was.
We've actually seen more recent moves that are, in my opinion, secessionist, by Texas taking over their own border and keeping the federal government away from their part of the border. I I agree with that move.
Me too.
Wholeheartedly to help shut down the border and everything, but that's a secessionist move. My
I mean, if
opinion.
you're looking at it, go ahead.
Oh no, I'm sorry. Please.
No, I didn't mean to cut you off. Yeah, Brad, exactly. With Texas deciding that they're just going to do it for themselves, like you agree with it. I agree with it. I think it's good that they did that. They are not willing to put up with the federal government not supporting them, which is a feeling there that they're getting. So they're taking it into their own hands, which is fine. That's a state issue. If they want to do that, they're more than welcome to do that. So we'll just see how that pans out. Aaron, what were you going to say? I'm sorry for cutting you off.
Oh, please don't apologize. I was going to say that I also agree with both of you that the border is a massive problem.
Huge problem.
But when you say like it's a secessionist like thing, it doesn't really get me to the. It doesn't. You have to help me get to the point where like that leads to like South Dakota and Oregon, all these other states like
Joining
suddenly like. I mean, there's a movie coming out that is going to explore this.
Yes.
A24, kill
I
us.
actually really want to see it so bad.
So do we.
Okay,
but
fair play, Aaron. So I would say we're seeing that with Florida, as well as other states actually sending help for the Texas, I guess, Border Patrol or whatever they have their own. They have like their own Texas Border Patrol as well, or their National Guard. Was that it? I think it was the Texas National Guard.
It was their National Guard. I do believe their own Border Patrol was also involved in that somehow. So I believe it's a bit of both.
Yeah,
but
Florida also has like
states.
A private thing too that the governor oversees.
Mm-hmm.
So we're seeing him actually send help there to them as a show of support. As we saw in the past, obviously, southern states all band together to create their own army. Again, it would look a little bit different today than it did then, as so many things do, based off of capabilities and everything. But I think it's definitely something that bears taking a look at.
It's not off the table.
Right.
It's not a sure thing. Obviously, I don't think anything is a sure thing, but I think it's definitely an option that is on the table, which is kind of why it's made it all the way up to being in the consciousness and being an A24 film, because people are thinking about it.
I suppose so. Do you think that military bases around the world make us an empire, and that if we closed military bases around the world, would that suddenly fix how you view this whole thing?
No, I mean, personally, I do believe in shutting down military bases around the world. I know that's not a popular opinion. It's a libertarian opinion I hold. Of course, not with you. But, I mean, everybody knows my feelings on this. So we don't need to, like, dive too much into that because, no. But as you've stated in the past, and to hold it against you in this context, basically the world goes as the U.S. goes. We kind of run decisions under NATO, under the UN. Everybody looks to the US for support in everything. So yes.
Well,
we 100% fit the definition.
I would put an argument in your column and say that a lot of the world doesn't look to the US anymore. So,
in true fashion, that actually brings us exactly back to some of the research I was doing, and let's dive back into that. So I wanted to look at kind of comparing how the fall of empires happens, and there are 4 specific issues, that kind of cause this, that are all-encompassing factors when it comes to empires falling. And this is based off of history, and they are economic issues. That's 1. They are social and cultural issues. That's 2. Environmental issues, 3. And political issues, which is 4. As you know, we print a fuckload of money. We see more and more taxation, whether it be for the wealthy or the middle class. We see all kinds of economic issues. I believe the U.S. we saw those figures. Aaron is adding $1 trillion, I believe,
Every
to the debt
100
every 100
days?
days.
Yep.
So that is an economic issue, and then obviously political issues. We have extremism, which plays a part in this. You know, quite frequently, actually. So,
what's an example of an environmental one? Is that like a volcano?
no, I mean later on, I look at some of the articles I was looking at actually refer to climate change as part of all of this. But in my opinion, those environmental issues are more adding to the like polarization that we
the
see.
instability.
Yeah,
Yep.
because clearly environmental issues. You also, I would say, run into hurricanes, earthquakes, tornadoes. How does the government, respond to those things, as we've seen and had, Matt on. The government is not very adept at helping out with these environmental issues.
I don't know, man.
So
I disagree with you on that because I think Florida did a great job. I think Texas has had to deal with even wildfires
Florida
now.
did a great job. So we kind of have to compartmentalize the difference of generally state governments versus federal governments in the case of looking at this, because of one of the potential outcomes ultimately being, sections of the country seceding or whatever, and having their own governments. That's actually one of the good things that's built into the Constitution, really, is that if somebody does decide to secede, they already have the state and local governments set up to help withstand ultimately their attempt to not gain any more federal funds and stuff like that. So,
Dan, you live a comfortable life inside of a house or wherever.
I do.
It's a good life. What would be the incentive for somebody like you to secede from the United States?
So
I mean, make that make sense for me.
So I would say that I'm more in the middle between Brad's position and your position. Like
Good.
Brad's
pussy.
like full on like it's gonna be like mayhem. But it's gonna be wild. Get ready, buckle up. Like I hope you're strapped and ready for this because it's gonna be wild. Whereas I think Aaron, you're more optimistic and you think like the sky's not falling, like it's not burning down around us. Like we're gonna withstand. We just have to see what happens. For me to secede from the United States of America, which if you know me, I really wouldn't want that to happen. Like, I really, really would not want anyone to be like, I'm out. Because in the end, all it does, I mean, you can wish and hope and be black-pilled and hope that it all falls down to pieces. But, like, the thing is it would be so much worse than any of us could imagine. And you could think in your grimmest nightmares how bad it would be, and it would be 10 times worse. So,
oh yeah.
I really.
First of all, I do have grimmest nightmares. Stupid purple fucking like polka dot thing.
Yeah, careful. McDonald's might come after you for
trademark.
That one. But yeah, TM. But like, I just think that if you're wishing and hoping, it's one thing to look at it objectively, which I think Brad is doing. He's done research on it, he's looked at it. It's one thing to look at it objectively and go, okay, here are the facts, and this is why it might lead to my idea of what we're looking at. But if you're just wishing and hoping and praying that it all falls apart, I really don't think you've thought through quite how bad it can get, and probably would get if we did. Which is why
Au contraire, mon frere. Actually, part of my research has showed that it might not look like what you think it's going to look like. It might not be this bloody secessionist movement, and that we could just have a slow collapse,
a peaceable breakup.
While national divorce is one of the things that came up. That has been floated on multiple occasions, where you just have your basically like Republican, right-wing government, and then you have a left-wing government, and all the states just kind of band together. Interesting when you have a red state that's not landlocked by other red states. What does that look like? Who knows? But as everybody knows, I only research in the direction that's going to prove me correct, as everybody does. And I really did look at this objectively, and I was shocked that the research kind of concluded a little bit that it would not be as like violent and disruptive as you anticipated from what you just said.
Well, I just think that I say that from the standpoint of, I wouldn't want it to get to that point. The horrible nightmare scenario. So if we can avoid that, great, perfect. And if national divorce is what that looks like, I know like you've said, it's been floated many times, and I am aware that it's been floated many times. I'll listen to and watch other podcasts where they bring it up, and I think if we could get to a point where it's like, okay, we're going to peacefully separate without conflict. Okay, fine. If that's the thing that gets us to a point where we can all stabilize a little bit, then all right.
So I was thinking about this. Go ahead.
No, I was thinking, when I say stabilize, I mean, like, Brad, you brought up, political instability, extremism, things like that, and it feels like all of that is continuing to progress further and further. When I say stabilize, I mean we bring the temperature back down on all that stuff.
Oh, I'd love for the temperature to be brought back down.
I say ramp it up.
I miss the boring days where Bob Dole and Bill Clinton and Ross Perot were going at it.
I say turn it up to 11. Let's go.
It's actually been worse in this country multiple times before. We're talking about it in our lifetimes. Maybe, this is bad, but
yeah, but
it's been worse.
Everything is different from even 50 years ago. The advent of the internet, actually, believe it or not, is something that is going to be looked at in this case. Causes actually further rises in extremism, the media being extremist in their views and selectionist in what they actually release, and where it's better to always be first instead of right, actually causes a lot of issues because nobody reads retractions.
The good news is that's actually that's actually kind of like it's kind of okay. A lot of media companies are shutting down. The market's spoken, right? Like, the New York Times will always be around, but there's a lot of other companies like Vice or Vox or whatever, that Slate, that they always report first, and there's not really any market for that anymore.
So when I start getting into this a little bit more, I think you're going to start seeing some more of the parallels. I'll be pointing out more modern time things, as well as some historical context. But ultimately, we're going to look at, there's 4 different factors. They harken back to economic, social, and cultural, environmental, and political. And we're going to look at them in different facets under different names for these purposes, but you'll see that they all do end up tying back to those 4 themes.
What's the analog, the closest analog you have to any of this, right? Because I'm looking at a list of empires that fell. It's a long list.
Yes.
And it's a lot, and I don't see the United States in any of these examples. I don't see a correlation.
I'd say,
for example, let me say, for example,
I think you're looking at it in a different context. It looks different today. Obviously, an empire is going to look and have a different definition ultimately than what it looked like when the Roman Empire fell. If on your list is the Soviet Union,
well, the Russian Empire is on here, but
right, which it should be, then you have to apply that to the U.S.
Actually, that's probably the closest analog to in this discussion, because I don't think I would consider like France and Britain. They were just all over the place, and that's unsustainable, especially after 2 world wars. But the Russian Empire is probably the closest.
Right. But that's modern day. Like you have to consider
Pretty
that modern
much,
day.
yeah.
So that fits the definition. If that fits the definition, then the U.S. fits that definition.
Okay.
You
So
have to
Dan, you were
remember,
kind of
while we aren't directly holding land like Russia was, that split itself into smaller states, uh, we hold our own country, which is made up of smaller states, where we could see secession movements and stuff like that. So, which would ultimately affect world politics and everything else. So, which the fall of the Russian Empire affected global,
Oh
like
yeah.
global politics.
Oh
So,
yeah. When the USSR fell, yeah, that it shook everything up because since World War II, between World War II and the fall of the Soviet Union, global geopolitics was basically a chess game between us and them. And when they fell, it changed everything. But Aaron, you were going to ask me something. I
well, I
forget.
was when I was saying like I don't see a correlation between like the United States present day and like a lot of these other examples. You were kind of like maybe wondering if that's not necessarily true.
Well, so you were looking for an analog, and it's fair to say that because you want to see some sort of uh, parallel or draw some sort of parallel. But I think um, so. Brad mentioned having the USSR on there, which we just talked about. I think it's different for every empire. The problem, I think it's like one or two main problems that really drove each one of them down. If you read about them, it's not all four factors. It's maybe one or maybe two that are so overblown that it just brings them down. Um, so in our case, if you're gonna have this conversation and consider us an empire, I think it's valuable to see which factors are impacting us the most and which might snowball into us splitting into our different sections.
It's political, right, and cultural. Is
I
that
would
what you would
I would
say?
I would say those two are my two. Yeah,
That's probably what I would say.
if I had
well,
to
so
say.
from a cultural perspective, one of the things that I keep hearing is empires that have fallen have become increasingly engrossed in basically sexual preferences
Mhm.
and things like that. And
Mhm.
what do we see exactly today? The
Mhm.
same thing happening in the United States. But that comes down to your social and cultural issues.
Yep.
Because obviously conservatives don't like that stuff. And
They
then
do. They just don't want to talk about it out loud.
one of the things that I'm not diving too far into because it's just not really up my alley. That was saying in these articles was actually the fall, basically, of religion. So more and more. The younger generations aren't as religiously based. I know specifically I am not. And there's that saying, every day we stray further from God. That's essentially where we're at here in the United States because religion has kind of really taken a back seat compared to where it used to be, especially in like the 50s, 60s. Um,
Well,
you
the
know,
problem is that with what your examples are going to basically come to is that people have religion and then when it goes away they replace it with politics.
Correct. I was
that would be
just
that's fair.
I was just gonna say, the thing about and why religion plays such a big part or a role in that is because it gave many people a shared framework, like a shared way of looking at the world. And the problem is, and you know, you I know Brad, you're not religious, and that's fine. It gives, but it gave people at that time, up until it started to up until recent times when it started to fade out, it gave people a framework, community to build. We've kind of lost that sense of community, whether it be in religion or anywhere else, really. And now we're all a bunch of sort of disparate pieces, and that's why when politics becomes your religion, which for many, especially in our age range, it's increasingly becoming a religious thing. you may be an atheist, but if you're you're still religious when it comes to that. You're still treating this thing as a religious experience, and it's taking the place of that, which is kind of unhealthy because you're deifying politicians, which you just shouldn't be doing anyway.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
taking the place of a like I said, a shared framework, and it's replacing it with whatever you want to think. This person thinks something different. That's your new religion. That's the new thing you're thinking today. And it's constantly changing because you're looking at people as if they were gods, essentially.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of how, like, speaking of empires falling, like the French Revolution was basically fought over the very same ideas. There was it was accusations. Accusations led to the guillotine,
Mm-hmm.
and then if you were like accused of dangerous groupthink, then you would have to be executed. And then ultimately, the last guy to get executed was the guy who just started the whole thing. So Robespierre died the last, but it's kind of similar now. If you associate yourself with the wrong groups or you believe the wrong things, that even 10 or 15 years ago weren't that radical. Actually, like, you could go watch Barack Obama talk about immigration, and he sounds pretty much like a Republican
He
now.
sounds like a conservative now.
Yeah.
If you listen to 08 Barack, he sounds like he might be a conservative these days, but
he didn't support gay marriage.
Well, look at Bill Clinton in the late 90s when he was like, abortion should be rare and
safe,
safe.
legal, and rare.
Yeah, safe, legal, and rare. Like, that was like the whole thing. And now today it's way different. Their stance has just pushed way further left.
Because the Overton window has moved and moved and moved.
It's almost gotten so wide that you like every crazy idea is now acceptable.
And the thing is like, now, without going too deep into the weeds on that, like every idea being acceptable, we're kind of trying to build this like bubble for everyone to live in, where literally everything you say or anything you say could be like conceivably the truth, when really it's not objectively. But we have to be nice to everyone, and we have to be affirming to everyone, even though some ideas are correct and some ideas are not, and that's the way life is. People have just lost sight of that because, and again, this goes back to like deifying people in power and like looking at politicians as if they're gods, because these politicians want you to vote for them, so they're going to tell you what you need to hear so you can vote for them. And that's like, I feel like it all connects, and that's one of the things. They'll tell you, oh yes, your idea is correct, vote for me, and then when you hear that, you vote for them.
And I think there's like a danger to the whole like the Jacobins would send you to the guillotine if let's say like in 2017 you made a joke online,
oh my goodness,
about somebody's pronouns. Today you're going to the guillotine, and so like there is like a sort of like a pressure against that now, but in culturally in America. But unfortunately, like we export our anti-intellectual culture to other places around the world. So anyway,
that's not true. That's not true. We live in a world of cancel culture. There was actually a kid who got drafted into the NHL, and then his team immediately terminated his contract because when he was like 13, he tweeted something that was like
I remember that,
like homophobic. So
I just mean more like
to this day lost like his basically entire like life's potential revenue stream because
well, there's no one doing that, but I'm saying is like the pushbacks coming from like Shane Gillis hosting SNL and Dave Chappelle getting his special on Netflix, but
people getting uncanceled basically.
Yeah, or they didn't let themselves get canceled, and they've always been there. But it's a religion, so yes, there's a possibility there. Sure,
that's part of again, that's one of the factors. So one of the things that this is, I'm going to break this down into the 4 sections ultimately and discuss a little bit about it. I'll give you some info on a section. We can discuss, compartmentalize, and move on. So first one is financial problems. So I'm going to look at this from again, these 4 core points that go back to the other 4 core. It's financial problems, corruption, lack of cohesion, and outside forces. So that all encompasses the original 4 points.
So that would be the Russian Revolution, basically. That's how that happened.
Yes.
Because it was a class thing.
So financial problems. Basically, it's saying maintaining empires is expensive. You have military, infrastructure, government, and how does the government pay for things? Taxes. So 95% of all U.S. federal government revenue comes from taxes. 50% is personal income tax. The government must tax the citizens and corporations to function, and there are other options like debt and printing money, which leads to inflation, which is a hidden tax, and so they aren't necessarily long-term solutions. Towards the end of the Roman Empire, the wealthy landowners began to pretty much devise clever ways of avoiding taxes by setting up independent territories that they had to defend. And it's basically similar to wealthy people trying to store money in offshore accounts today to avoid taxation. So a recent ProPublica leak made it obvious that the wealthy allegedly don't pay the same percentage as we do because they're avoiding taxes, but not illegally. They're using loopholes and things like that to avoid taxation. And the U.S. operates under a deficit almost every year where costs exceed tax revenues. We borrow more money to pay debt every year. As long as the world is confident the U.S. can pay its debt back at some point in the future, then it works. But it could be a breaking point as inevitably empires have fallen before. You and I have talked at length on this podcast about the financial issues that the United States has. The de-dollarization of the world, where less and less countries are accepting the U.S. dollar as trade currency, things of that nature. Economists have been coming out saying that the U.S. dollar is comparatively weak, or at least projecting some kind of fall off for the U.S. dollar. So that spells big problems, high debt, high inflation. That's things that we were seeing with Argentina, who, recently elected a pretty radical president themselves. We see Venezuela with high inflation, things like that. It could be somewhat of a similar situation. Thoughts?
So, obviously, inflation's it's to steal a term, top of mind for everyone these days, because the average individual can feel that, and if that's one of the factors, economic problems, we have it in spades, unfortunately.
Well, inflation is high. It doesn't really go down. That's one thing that sucks about inflation.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I still think it's worse everywhere around the world. I think the predictions about the U.S. dollar weakening is a little, that might age poorly. I think, especially when there's countries that are they're adopting different currencies, and I don't see that working out for them in the end.
Aaron, it goes back to kind of what I said earlier. You want to be optimistic,
Sure.
And so I kind of want to see how it all plays out this year and into next, and we'll kind of get a sense of, are things really going to have a shakeup?
Well,
Good.
Yeah, go ahead, Brad.
So I would actually argue that not necessarily that you're wrong, that prediction could not be great in the end, or might not age well. But I would also say that dollarization for the U.S. relies heavily on what Saudi Arabia does, because they are the preeminent, obviously, oil dealer in the world. If they choose to no longer accept U.S. dollars as the exchange for oil, then that could really fuck everybody over.
Mm-hmm.
And then that the whole BRICS thing that we've talked about in the past could actually be very strong as opposed to the US dollar. So I'm not saying you're wrong necessarily, but I'm saying I think that dollarization and everything in this regard kind of goes with how Saudi Arabia goes. And luckily we gave them all that money to kill Yemeni people, so they'll probably be on our side for a while. But
well, there's that black pill coming in right
isn't
there.
it?
No, you're right up to a point. I think that there's just the American economy is too dynamic and free for anything like that to happen. But I guess that depends on if we ever get rid of oil or not.
So that kind of brings me to the next section. Since you think that everything's all hunky-dory. Next one is corruption. Woohoo! Everybody's favorite topic, mine especially. So as we all know, power corrupts. And as empires grow, government payrolls grow, more people in the system that are willing to subvert the rules. We see that quite frequently a lot here in the U.S. with the government saying, "Oh, well, we're going to put together a bill to stop us from stock trading and all this other stuff," but it's never going to pass. So we see those things. Government officials lie about everything, as we know. So basically, the more rule breaking that happens, the more it will happen, and they have a self-enforcing feedback loop, so nothing ever happens, nothing changes. Wealthy individuals and companies funnel money for their own benefits, again, as we see, and that government officials basically are complicit in corruption of large corporations, i.e. lobbying. So it's a function of the system. It's inevitable. But a few recent examples, during COVID, everybody was getting PPP loans, and small businesses were getting closed at large rates, and giant corporations were allowed to stay open. Lobbying and campaign finance issues are actually backed by the U.S. Constitution by way of the federal courts. And so you could kind of look also at the financial crisis of 2008 as a massive case of corruption, as wealthy people and politicians made out fine, but the common man was completely fucked with all of these banks going under and stuff like that, and then subsequently bailed out with taxpayer dollars, leading to more inflation, higher taxes, etc. Trust in government actually declines as income inequality grows, and the U.S. is ranked 10th in income inequality and ranked 27th in corruption. And so according to the Corruption Perceived Index, the U.S. got a 67 out of 100, with 0 being very corrupt and 100 being non-corrupt.
What's the least corrupt country?
Yeah, I gotta know.
Let me see if I can.
If you can't
pull that
find
Zimbabwe.
No, I did.
I'm actually serious. It's
pulled
probably
up
like
that.
Zimbabwe.
Yeah, I pulled up the index.
Watch it be a
bear
Nordic
with me
country.
here.
Watch it be a
Sometimes
Sweden.
this map is like
Switzerland,
all fucked
Sweden.
up. So go ahead and discuss. I'll see if I can pull that country up.
All right, I've got the white pill here.
I was looking for the white pill. I was waiting for it.
On corruption, I don't
optimists.
have much. Well, I don't have much to say about the whole corruption thing because you're right; it exists no matter what. My only thing is, I want to blame the voters for not holding their elected representatives accountable. We have the ability to replace anybody at any time, and we choose not to. And so, for that, I blame the people. What say you, Dan?
No, I'm with you, Aaron. Like Brad said, corruption. It's not a bug; it's a feature. It's gonna happen. And you have to control for that. And what were the controls for that in the founding fathers' conception of the United States? What was the controls? We were the controls, and
we still are.
We still are. But we need to learn or relearn that we are the controls. And
Yeah.
Right, but keep in mind that there's an entire subsection of the United States who believes that the popular vote should elect the president because, as we've seen in the past, the popular vote doesn't pick the president. So technically, and as we saw, faithless electors, things like that, we could actually see that being actually part of the corruption, right? So
I actually
sure,
don't even.
it's like built in, but like, you know,
Well, I
there's
don't give. Sorry, I don't give the popular vote any oxygen whatsoever. That's not a discussion for me at all. The word doesn't appear in the Constitution, so I don't care.
Okay, so here it is. The bottom. I'm gonna go with the bottom five. Okay, so we have Yemen. I'll go bottom. Yeah, five. So Yemen is 5. Venezuela is 4. Somalia is 3. Syria is 2, and South Sudan is 1. They have respectively between an 11 and a 16 score out of 100.
Oh my goodness.
And this only looked at 180 countries. I believe there's 195. So
wow. Not a surprise for any of them.
No.
Not particularly. Now, I also mentioned that trust in government has waned. So I decided to look at the share of population who trust their government via 2023 numbers. And the United States, only 40% of people trust the government.
Wow. 40%.
That's got to be from COVID, right? Like, it must have
So-
spiked down.
God, you're so good at just like setting me up. Like, it's unbelievable. That's why you haven't lost your job yet. So we did talk about COVID and the corruption that was kind of enforced there. So the next section of things is lack of cohesion. So post World War II, America was actually very united because we all came together to fight the axis of evil. And it was united, but now polarization and other factors contribute to lack of cohesion, i.e. politics and corruption. So, we see a very divided group of people just between the Israel and Gaza, and like that whole war, and where you stand on that is basically part of your identity. Same thing with the Ukraine war. All these things, people are super divided on a lot of this stuff, which just kind of adds to the lack of cohesion and politics. We saw it back in Vietnam in the 70s and stuff. People were very anti-Vietnam, and there was, trust in government was low and at that time as well. So that is, that's a quick one. People just being divided, which we see more and more now. Anecdotally, you would say people are not really divided. Most people can just coexist with other people, and it's not a big deal. But if you believe the media and everything else, we're the most divided we've ever been.
Yeah, gotta ignore the media. White pill on this one is that if you ask people, do they trust the government, and people that are elected, they'll say no. And then if you ask them if they like their elected representatives, not in this group, but they'll often say yes. So there is that sort of like weird bias.
Right. So the last part of this is outside forces. So outside forces acting on an empire are usually weather, which brings you back to environmental issues, other empires, new technologies, things like that. So over time, an empire's luck just runs out, and they experience a number of outside forces acting on them. So they specifically mentioned extended droughts, invading barbarian forces, which, as we know, does not happen too frequently anymore. The advent of a new religion, Scientology. New technology is actually going to be the internet here, as well as, I guess, a few other things it could be, and disease. So COVID. See, Aaron, I know everything that you're going to ask before you fucking ask it. That's why I do these deep dives. So something outside of an empire acts upon it and it becomes weakened. Climate change and China are, big pieces of these outside forces, which aid in obviously polarization, things of that nature. However you feel about China, but one of the things is the internet. So new technology, as technology has grown, so has polarization, or at least it's more in the forefront. So has misinformation, disinformation, and lying, corruption. So the internet, while has been globalizing, also has a flattening effect. It brings people together, but it also brings together the ability to group together, and it specifically mentions right-wing conspiracies and Antifa organizing, basically because of the internet. It's a very powerful force, but we're only in the beginning to understand it. Obviously, AI, things like that has there's been issues with spreading disinformation. They won't even generate a white person that's a Nazi, like they make them black or Indian or whatever. So technology is obviously a big issue. We did talk about the growing debt of the U.S. is $1 trillion. Outside political forces, there's so many variables here, but it looks this particular article says, to your point, Dan, it would only have temporary chaos if we split apart and the empire comes to a close, but who knows?
Right.
And then I did a section on what it looks like when America collapses.
Okay. I mean, all that is, especially like the technology piece and the now I know you wanted to talk about this a little later. I don't know where you are on this, but with China,
China.
China, there's some theories out there that they're always working their stuff behind the scene, very cloak and dagger, to try to get the one up on good old US of A.
Quick, Dan, who was Triple H's bodyguard in WWE?
China. So, there's that, but I think the technology piece is actually bigger, other than like other empires acting on our own. The technology piece is the thing that's really affecting it, because we can echo chamber a lot. If you're not careful, you'll find yourself quickly, with algorithms on different social media websites or things like that. You'll find yourself quickly sequestered into seeing only what the algorithm knows you like. So, if you have a certain political view, it's going to show you, it's going to feed it and feed it and feed it. And that's what technology is a beautiful thing, but it's also caused a lot of that like polarization effect, because certain people aren't hearing voices that don't agree with them every day anymore. It's like, I'm only hearing from my friends who agree with me, as opposed to, oh, my one buddy thinks that I'm a complete idiot for believing A, B, and C. But I don't see that, and he doesn't see my stuff because we don't agree with each other. And the algorithm knows that.
That was interesting about the Google Gemini is that the people who made it obviously put their own biases into it,
Right.
And the Nazi thing was funny or whatever, but the more interesting thing was that if you asked it, should Barack Obama be jailed, it would go absolutely not. We do not do that in this country. And then if you said, should Ronald Reagan be jailed, it was like, well, here's about 10 reasons why he should be jailed. It was like, what?
Right.
Yeah, and so that's all. It's programmed by people who have their own biases and who will not discard those biases. For example, this is a couple years old now at this point, but like, the whole Twitter censoring people before it was bought by Elon and it was owned by the old regime. Basically,
Jack.
Yes, yeah. I was forgetting what that dude's name was, but I knew if he had a very punchable face. I knew it if I
He
saw
sure
it.
does. Yeah.
But like, no, so these people have these biases. It's programmed. They're programming that into the technology. It's kind of hard. It's not hard to avoid, but it's not like they're trying to avoid it either.
It was really interesting. Google Gemini is the key example, the best example of this, because those people probably thought we have made this thing safe.
Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah. And then people that were just regular people went in there and was like, all right, let's see how safe it is. And it's like, oh, it's so safe that it won't do white people and stuff.
We need AI that is safe, legal, and rare.
Safe, legal, and rare AI.
No, AI for all at any time, up to and including. Yeah, it was really interesting. It was a really telling example of like, that's the unknown that you're talking about with technology. Like, sure, I'll give you that one. That one I can't do much about that.
See, you've already started to collapse yourself.
Well, no, well, Dan's right. It's gonna help. But I don't know what the fuck TikTok is going to do to a generation of kids, because I don't
make
fucking
them
use
idiots. It's going to make them idiots. Is what it's going to do.
If the Tide Pods didn't do it, TikTok sure will.
TikTok's gonna.
They got it from TikTok. No, yeah, it's the Chinese Communist Party has a different version of TikTok in its own country.
Yes.
So all of this led me to article on Medium and ultimately discussing some of this. And
this is an actual legitimate website, not the ProPublica one you cited.
The 4. Aaron, if you have problems with my sources, do your own research. You're not allowed to do that anymore. But I did. So this basically summarizes the 4 arguments ultimately why America probably could collapse. Number 1 being it's massively in debt, as we all know and have talked about ad nauseum. Political tensions have never been higher. America is not a good place to live anymore, which I actually disagree with this one wholeheartedly.
I do too.
I disagree hardly.
Don't have to white pill me on that. There are a lot of people who come here because they still believe in the American dream.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, but it's still not that bad. And then America is collapsing. Argument 4 is America will have trouble collecting taxes in the near future. One of the things that this piece actually does talk about is apparently rich people are fleeing the United States in greater numbers and not keeping their money here. And then it actually also talked about the advent of cryptocurrency, allegedly making payments harder to trace and stuff like that. But that's not actually super true. As we've seen, they can use the blockchain against you because it records, all transactions and stuff. But that doesn't always have to be true. I'm sure people can create cryptocurrencies that aren't like that. So that is the top 4.
Yeah, I would say also scary for me is the idea of debanking. I think that's a scary thing that could happen to somebody.
100%. So ultimately it was saying, imagine that America is collapsing, and how could you tell? Some of the things you might look for: high economic inequality, which we again rank number 10 on income inequality. High levels of political polarization, have that. So here, we're going to count these out here, okay? Absurdly high cost of living, making it difficult for ordinary people to make ends meet. I think we meet that definition. Unreasonably high taxes. I guess that depends on what you're thinking here. Wasteful government spending. Oh boy, do we. A dysfunctional healthcare system. Meet that. Elites who are out of touch with the average person. Oh my God. Thousands of people living in the country looking for greener pastures elsewhere. Oh boy, we got that. Millions of undisciplined people who live in their parents' basements and spend all day playing video games. 100% have that. And political parties that care more about fighting each other than solving people's problems. We meet all 10 of those.
To varying degrees.
Yes. I mean, they get a little weird there at the end by throwing in the people living in their parents' basement and playing video games. Like, I live in my own basement playing video games. So. It's not my mom's house, but that's what I'm doing. So there have been people who have been predicting the fall and decline of America in the coming decades. And it ranges from hedge fund manager Ray Dalio, Silicon Valley entrepreneur Balej, I'm not even going to butcher that last name, historian Peter Turchin, and James Davidson as well, who's an investor, have all kind of made, to some level of prediction. So, we've seen, you actually mentioned some of these that have already collapsed, including the Soviet Union. So what kind of things could happen if it collapses? How would it collapse is kind of what you had asked the original question, Aaron, which led to this whole thing. So one is collapse by secession, aka Soviet-style collapse. In 1885, Mikhail Gorbachev was the leader of the Soviet Union and decided he didn't want to rule with force anymore. So he wasn't going to threaten Soviet Union member states, and they could do as they pleased. And basically, everybody wanted to leave the Soviet Union, it looks like. So in a matter of a few years, it went from 15 member states to 0. Secession isn't totally out of the question, as we had talked about before. California floated secession in 2016, and then Texas was the one that floated secession for Obama. And if you're living in the U.S., basically, if living in the U.S. becomes too much of a burden, secessionist movements might get a lot stronger, which we have seen more recently. So that's one of the things. And then this went on to say, suppose Hawaii declares independence. Do you think Joe Biden would order the Air Force to bomb them? Because, people say the U.S. military is too tough. If somebody wants to secede, they can't beat the federal government and all this other stuff. It's a huge argument, even for people who are anti-gun. Well, you can't take on the federal government. And I would argue that's one, not true.
The Mujahideen would like a word.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Anytime anyone
Vietnam
brings that
would
up,
like a word.
Yes. Anytime anyone says, "Oh, you can't take on you would never be able to take on the government," I'm like, have you not looked at any conflict that has happened basically ever?
Wait, didn't we just pull out of Afghanistan?
Right.
The Taliban is running Afghanistan, right? Who was running it when we got there?
Right.
The Taliban, right? Fucking morons. So that's a Soviet-style collapse. Another one is economic collapse. So this could happen a few different ways. The value of the U.S. dollar could drop significantly due to overprinting or speculation, something that we've talked about here. The government could see a significant dip in tax revenues and not be able to pay its bills. And hackers could shut down the banking system, which is very fragile, kind of as we all know. Sorry about that.
The banking system in particular, you could just tweet out something and tank a stock price.
Yep.
Right. Yeah, I mean, look at what happened with Tesla, basically, and Twitter. Elon Musk buying Twitter severely changed the cost of the price and everything, and it's a big thing. So this next one is a sovereign individual style collapse. So if enough states secede, it would hurt tax revenues and force the government to rethink how it budgets, which it's not good at. And if enough people leave the United States, they might have to, rethink their budget, because I guess today more and more Americans are moving to Costa Rica, Georgia, the country, and Portugal to enjoy low or even zero taxes. Sorry, I lost my place when I was reading there. So another one is a national divorce, something that's been touted before, where political tensions are so high, as we see, that right and left wingers can't stand one another and they can't share a country together anymore. So a national divorce would break itself apart by choice.
The Czechoslovakia way.
Yeah, it's possible. You're seeing now in Moldova, there's a sect of Moldova that's tried to basically secede from Moldova and has asked Vladimir Putin for protection against the Moldovan military. Speaking of military, We could have a military collapse, civil war, like the movie that we're all excited about, or being overextended and an invasion by another country. I do posit that this is not likely. It's never been done before, really.
Good luck, because behind every
idiots,
blade of grass there'll be a
we
rifleman.
all know what happened when the U.S. got attacked on our own soil last time. So, good fucking luck.
Well, and even if you wanted to, you couldn't. Even the Japanese knew this in World War II. The Japanese went, "Ooh, can we invade the United States?" And they would be like, "No," because the saying was, "Behind every blade of grass, there's a rifle." Because
So supposedly no one actually said that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, supposedly that's a fake quote.
I could. Well, I'll have to look into that.
Yeah.
But either way, it's true.
Mm-hmm.
Then the next one was an American dictatorship. I also find relatively unlikely, but growing presidential powers, as we've seen, Congress kicking their powers to other branches or non-governing branches, such as the ATF, where they try to allow them to make these arbitrary laws about guns, even though they don't have the power to make laws. And that's the main view of collapses that they said. But what would the world look like afterwards? They mentioned an internet dark ages. The US builds a lot of tech, throughout the world and stuff, so we would take a big hit there, but it's not going to look like a complete internet collapse. Just look a little different. An EU style America is possible, where you break into a whole bunch of city states, 50 individual states, just like the EU is all individual countries, but they're all band together. America still exists as it is now. It's just not a world power anymore. I think that one's possible, definitely, as we've seen basically a weakening outlook on the U.S., I think, throughout the world. That doesn't help with presidents, which is kind of why we started looking at this in the first place, or some kind of new empire forms. But I think that would likely take another country like invading us and actually being successful for something like that to happen, or a radical collapse of the U.S. where the government is completely actually overthrown, and rebuilt from the bottom up. But you would have to completely dismantle the Constitution for that, in my view, and have to implement a new constitution. I don't support that, and I don't believe that that's likely, but it was one of the possibilities.
Okay. Dan?
I'd have to say, of any of those, the most realistic one would probably be a world in which we still exist as we are. We just don't hold as much sway. Which I could see happening globally, where it's like, the United States still exists and still operates as it has, and under the conceptualization that it has, it'll just continue to be. But like I said, we just may not hold sway. All the other possibilities, especially the ones involving invasion or conflict, seem like further reaches, almost to the point of impossibility for me. But nothing is truly impossible. So I put those way on the end of the spectrum closest to impossible.
A lot of the stuff he listed is just really hard, and people are pretty much lazy. So you'd have to it'd take a lot of effort to.
Yeah, that I will not disagree with. People are painfully lazy, and therefore anything involving, hey, put this bag on your back and carry this thing that weighs anywhere from 5 to 10 pounds all day. Oh, and run a lot? Yeah. Good luck selling that to most people.
Well, that's one of the reasons why I kind of find this to be so interesting, right? Because as polarizing as Donald Trump is, we had January 6th, and whatever anybody feels about that, that's their opinion. But if he wins this time, do we see something similar from the left?
I
it's
would bet
hard,
on it.
right? Like, or even a civil war, in my opinion. Like, what would that even look like? Because we all know liberals don't really like guns. So it's like you're going against a base of people who love guns and have so many fucking guns, like that it outweighs like your ability to have them. So I don't think a civil war or anything could be fought the way that it was like before in certain states like that. I mean, that's just, I don't know. Urban warfare, I think, changes the way that this all would look. Like a civil war was so different. And who knows what that looks like in the US on a large scale. I mean, we've seen it in other countries, for sure, but I wonder what that would look like in a large scale. I mean, it would damage the reputation of the United States so much, I believe, if there were some kind of civil war to break out. But that would ultimately lead to basically the United States still existing, but not being a power,
Yeah.
like I had mentioned. So who knows?
That's probably one of those. I mean, in my mind, that is the scenario I would least like to see of any of them, because I wouldn't want that. I wouldn't want, like, when you use the term civil war, I'm thinking about like actual, like, between factions fighting, and that's the least. Like, I don't think anyone is realistic about what that would look like. It would be so much more terrible than I think people imagine, and I would never want that to happen. So I would want any of the other options before that option. So
I go
guys,
nuclear options.
so let me just say now, because it is 2024 and we have an election coming up, if you're thinking about getting a little bit, if you want to join the Boogaloo Boys, just think about this. How about no? How about we do anything other than that, please?
Do you like air conditioning?
Yeah, do you
You
like
do? Okay.
You like food on your table every day?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right, closing thoughts, because I would like to finish up with something fun.
Ooh, fun.
Okay.
And
Well, I think you should close it up. I don't mean
I know,
closing
but
thoughts.
we've gone this far, so we might as well hit at least an hour and a half.
Sure.
So I think we should. I was trying to do a deep dive into a conspiracy theory. I'm not going to do that today. We went too long, and quite honestly, I didn't get to dive as deep as I need to on it. So I have a pivot here. I'm bringing this back. It's called Uncalled For Questions. So neither of you know what I'm going to ask, and just try to be as truthful. I usually do 3. We'll probably just go with 2 questions to close it out.
Okay.
Okay. So, would you rather drink a cup of your own blood or a cup of your own urine?
Urine.
Take the blood.
Nah, see, if Bear Grylls taught me anything, it's that you can, in fact, drink your own pee. The thing with blood is
You just gotta like strain it through a t-shirt.
the thing with blood, the problem with blood is that there's so much iron content in it that to drink, like, you'd get so sick, you'd probably vomit your guts out for, like, who knows? I mean, I wouldn't try it. I don't recommend anybody try it, but I know for a fact, because I've watched enough TV. I've watched some Man vs. Wild. You can filter the pee and drink the pee.
I've seen Bear Grylls put his piss inside of the skin of a snake
And
as
drink
well.
it. And drink it.
I understand that. I'm still going. I'll drink my own blood.
Oh, Brad, is using a life straw a cop out? Because I would
Yes,
just
100%.
damn it, because I would
100%.
just pee into a cup and use the life straw.
Brad, you have to pick as well. Answer your own goddamn question.
I actually might go with blood.
Oh, he's gonna go with the blood.
I get urine, but you see people hunting and killing deer and shit, and then drinking
eat
the
the heart!
blood, and yeah, like stuff like that afterwards. I'm not as concerned about it. They're both warm. One's just a little thicker than the other.
No.
All right. Last question. What is one thing that you've seen that you wish you could unsee?
Mm.
Hmm.
For the record, I also I'm pulling from a list of questions that I have had for well over a year, and I'm just randomly picking them, so I don't actually have an answer to them myself, Aaron.
How not PC can I get with this question? Because I am
Again, we're on Rumble. You can go wherever you want.
I have to step in and be the responsible one and say, just be good.
Oh, okay. I won't go too crazy.
Be respectful.
You know what? I'll let Aaron go, and if you want to stop me while I'm answering, I'll change it up to another answer. I got two.
Okay, I look. It's half a joke and half not. There's a new Ghostbusters movie coming out. I would like to unsee the Lady Ghostbusters movie because I thought that was just so horrible, and I love Ghostbusters.
Yes, thank you, Aaron. Thank you very much. That is an awesome answer that I fully endorse. If I could get rid of that from my brain, I would.
Yes.
Actually, I might cop out a little bit and say that if I could forget something just to remember it again, it would have to be.
That wasn't the question, Dan.
See,
that was not the question.
All right, so
Please,
you need to unsee
finish.
it, not unsee it so you can see it again because it was that good. That's not.
Damn it! All right, so long story short, when I was in high school, I was in Army ROTC. We had to do every year we do award ceremonies. I always spoke. I always was the master of ceremonies every year. So I had to be at a podium and talk the whole time. One year, as we decorated the lunchroom, we had a lunch table that didn't have a skirt on the front of it, so you could see the people's legs underneath the table. One of the parents, I will not name who, was this was a mother of one of the cadets, was sitting at her table, the one without the skirt on the table, wearing a skirt, spread eagle. At the time, she was having her time of the month, and she had something else going on that I didn't quite know. I could see faces in the crowd turning white because people were noticing. I wasn't noticing. I didn't see it at first. And I looked over and I saw one of the other parents glance over and see, and then completely shut down. So I'm looking around the room trying to scan. Where is it? What's going on? What am I seeing? Boom. I see it. Terrible. And this is terrible. And this is before.
I think I'm gonna change my answer to the last question. I'm gonna go with P.
No. Oh, it's terrible. Listen. That it was honestly, and this is before I had seen a vagina in real life. Like, that was like before that had happened for me. So terrible. Like,
too busy watching wrestling.
Too busy watching. I was more concerned with who was going to get a stunner next week on Raw.
It was everyone.
It was everyone, and it was awesome.
All right. For me, I'm definitely going to go with my dad's dick. I think everybody has ever seen their dad's dick because they've either had to shower with a parent. Unfortunately for me, I was taking a shit, and my dad decided it was okay to come in and piss in the sink. So
no, your dad was
Dallas was the man.
Yo,
I love that motherfucker, but I've unfortunately also witnessed him shitting and smoking a cigarette at the same time, and to this day it's the most disgusting smell I ever remember. So
oh my goodness. Listen, there was a time so Brad, you know, my stepdad, you've spent a lot of time at my parents' house when we were kids. When he turned 50, we had a big blowout party for my dad's 50th birthday, and he got so drunk that he couldn't, like, you know, get up on his own power, find the bathroom, whatever. Me and my stepbrother ended up having to escort him to the bathroom, and we were just like, dude, you do that yourself. We ain't handling it. I basically propped him up on the wall and was like, go from there, boy, because I'm not helping you beyond that.
Look, everybody sees their dad's dick at least once in their life. It's
It
like
happens.
a birthright
It happens. You
of
gotta
being a son.
listen. One day, all of this will be yours. Like, just
Oh
happens.
God, I hope you didn't say that.
No. It's an old, but
Okay, I have to get us all back on track now.
Rein it in, producer boy.
I have to rein it in. Dan, thank you for joining us for this discussion. I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did.
I sure did. Thanks again for having me on for a second time. Hopefully this time doesn't need crazy editing and we're able to enjoy it much more easily.
I think it'll come out just fine, and you're always welcome back. And Brad, you're right 70% of the time. That's about all I can say.
All right, boys. Thanks a lot.
Thank you guys.
Bye.
Thanks so much.
Have a good one.